We're really pleased to bring you a new edition of Cloud Protection Manager, the latest and greatest version of Cloud Protection Manager available. And if you're not yet a customer, we offer a 30-day free trial as well as a free edition, both available on AWS Marketplace. Our presenters today, Sebastian Straub, who's our systems engineer here at N2WS. He leads our system engineering team, formerly at Dell, Oracle, and ScriptLogic. All around amazing guy, really technical and knowledgeable about N2W software. Joining him is Ezra Charm, that's me. I am running the marketing team here at N2W Software, and I've been working in technical marketing for quite a few years now. Just a quick overview on N2W Software for those who are not familiar with us. We were founded in 2012. Our product was released with the launch of the AWS Marketplace in 2013, and we are one of the top solutions on AWS Marketplace. We're headquartered in West Palm Beach, Florida, a development center in Haifa, Israel, and offices in Scotland, and a new office in Romania. What we focus on is cloud-native technologies that are purpose-built for AWS to allow you to better manage your AWS environment, and our product is distributed as an Amazon machine image through the AWS Marketplace. The reason why we exist is because when you move workloads to AWS, there's a sense of shared responsibility. AWS is providing an underlying foundation for you to use to manage your corporate IT or other workloads running on AWS. They provide compute, storage, databases, awesome software running on all that on these services, and regions and availability zones so you can orchestrate disaster recovery. But how you use these solutions and how you orchestrate backup and disaster recovery is ultimately up to you, the end customer. And the responsibility for protecting your data in AWS is also up to you. So you can see that in the blue section of the shared responsibility model. This is available on the AWS site. This is their information, their slide. You can see customer data is right there. It is up to you, the end user, to ensure that customer data is protected. I guess it leads to the question of what are you protecting your customer data from? What are the risks that are out there? So human error is a giant risk and probably the one we all face the most. We all have a coworker that has maybe too much credentials that we don't entirely feel great about. There's other accidents that happen, and these accidents happen both on our side as users of AWS and even potentially on the AWS side. Accidents happen. The underlying foundation of AWS was built by humans, and humans are error prone. Availability zone failures, while rare, do and have occurred. And they're something that we want to be able to enable our customers to have control over their destiny. If something goes wrong in AWS, our solution can help you get stood back up quickly, whether it's on your side or on the AWS side. Ransomware is a big risk. It happens in the AWS space. There's documented cases. The world out there, the bad guys out there are constantly targeting us, and they're staying ahead of the game, unfortunately. And there are ways to protect yourself, and our software does exactly that. Compliance and data security concerns. So sometimes you need backups just to have backups. It's an important part of a DevOps process. Before you push applications into production, backups are essential. As one of our customers says, there is no recovery without backups. And whether it's you're checking the box for compliance or data security concerns or any of these other reasons, backups are essential. And obviously EBS failures. This is something that does happen as well, and Cloud Protection Manager protects you from failures on the Elastic Block Store side. So our product, Cloud Protection Manager, is the most effective and efficient backup and recovery solution for AWS workloads. It's designed to make your job easier. You don't have to think about manually creating backups. You don't have to be concerned with lost data, and there's no unnecessary complexity. At current point, it takes less than 15 minutes to deploy our solution and start seeing value from it. So our time to value is something that we're focused on, and we're excited that something that directly addresses time to value is part of this release. Some of the things you can do with Cloud Protection Manager include cross-region disaster recovery. I can use 18 AWS data centers around the world to orchestrate a more resilient AWS environment. And I can do this in a cost-effective way. I don't have to have workloads running in 18 regions. I can do something like copying block-level incremental snapshots, very efficient, cost-effective, small footprint backup to 18 data centers around the world, or any one of the 18 data centers to use as disaster recovery sites. And obviously, this protects you from any issue run on the AWS side. If US East North Virginia has an outage or failure, you can stand back up 3 time zones away in Oregon. And do this really, really easily. And if you think about how the world has evolved, it's really incredible, because only a couple of years ago, if you wanted this level of service, a company like Iron Mountain would have to pull up to your doors on a daily basis, grab your backup tapes, load them into the back of a truck, and go for a long drive across the country. We've made that really simple, a mouse click or two, and a much more cost-effective way. You can also orchestrate disaster recovery across AWS accounts. And this protects you from malware and ransomware. If one of your accounts gets compromised, internally or externally, you can have a snapshot vault on AWS, a separate, highly secure AWS account that you're copying critical snapshots to. If one account gets compromised, you can stand back up out of another account. Being in this business as long as we have customers that this feature has saved them. Account compromised, ransomware, they've stood back up because they were maintaining a snapshot vault on AWS. And you can move mountains of data with simple mouse clicks. Combining these cross-account and cross-region disaster recovery scenarios, you can set up highly secure repos on other continents. If anything goes wrong, you're just a few mouse clicks away from full recovery. And recovery comes in all shapes and sizes. Not all disasters are giant disasters where we have to recover a full workload on another continent. Sometimes it's just that single Excel file that you need to get back up. You need to go and retrieve an Excel file or a presentation or something like that. And we make that really simple, whether you're recovering a single file, entire volumes, instances, applications, or even your entire environment. Cloud Protection Manager helps orchestrate all of that. We also provide application-consistent backup on AWS, so you can quiesce production workloads. MongoDB, Cassandra, we have great resources on our site to help customers obtain consistency for workloads running on AWS. This is how we add value above and beyond what's natively available in AWS. So obviously, AWS provides snapshots, and we can all use snapshots, and we should all be using and taking regular snapshots. Cloud Protection Manager adds in automation and a whole bunch of areas where we kind of fill in the gaps in turning snapshots from rudimentary backup into something that the enterprise can depend on. Cloud Protection Manager also supports multi-tenancy. So you can, if you're in a managed services space and you have, many customers, or if you're in corporate IT where you're servicing different departments, you can use a single Cloud Protection Manager console and set it up in a multi-tenant way so that your customers can have their own little environment that they log into, or you can do a sort of managed service scenario as well. And what you ultimately get to is that you're protected up until the giant asteroid hitting the planet. Disaster recovery has changed over the years, and disaster planning has changed over the years. And it used to be that we planned for the most likely scenario. And now we can have contingencies up until nobody on the planet has internet access. And literally just this earth-ending event is the only thing that you're not protected from. And that's really cool. And that's why I call Cloud Protection Manager the promise of the cloud delivered. So we all had this vision when we moved into AWS of this resilient environment, and I have these regions and availability zones, and I have snapshots, and I can orchestrate it all. And then when we got there, we saw that, yes, it's available, but it took a whole lot of work to build it. And so what we did is we made that really simple. We layered in the simple UI and the disaster recovery and file level recovery and all the auditing, reporting, and alerting you need, as well as important features like application consistent and aware backups. And that's why Cloud Protection Manager delivers on the promise of AWS in a very simple and cost-effective way. So let's go through some of the new features in Cloud Protection Manager. And we didn't do a 2.2 release webinar, but in version 2.2, which has been available for quite some time, we introduced SAML-based IDP integration so that if you're using something like ADFS, Active Directory, or Okta, or some other single sign-on tool, you can leverage those credentials in Cloud Protection Manager. This is a very important feature, especially for the large enterprise. None of us want to be managing backup users, especially when we exceed 20 Cloud Protection Manager users. It becomes a very tedious task to reset passwords and manage users. So, this is a very important feature available for quite some time, and it's being used in production in many enterprise organizations already. And I encourage you to take a look at some of our documentation on integrating your SAML-based IDP. In version 2.3, which is some of the features we're going over today, we're introducing automated backup for Amazon DynamoDB, a brand new RESTful API set, so you can integrate Cloud Protection Manager with other systems. You can get better use out of our CLI and API. Enhanced permissions for independent users. This is something that addresses a deeper functionality for multi-tenant environments. A whole new reporting set. We're working on upgrading our product and introduced all new reporting features. We also talked about this earlier, CloudFormation template. One-click deployment using CloudFormation. This is not yet available, but very, very close. And this will enable ease of standing up Cloud Protection Manager and managing the permissions that Cloud Protection Manager needs to orchestrate backup and disaster recovery. And also new cross-region, cross-account disaster recovery for Amazon Aurora. So just going to go through some of these features at a high level, and then we're going to turn it over to Sebastian for a demo. So automated backup for DynamoDB. We've pushed our way deeper into the feature sets that AWS is offering and the features that our customers are adopting quickly. Our customers wanted consolidated backup for DynamoDB, and we're very pleased to offer it. We've also, again, found ways to offer additional value above and beyond what the native DynamoDB backup includes. And this is really important if you're going to use us for on the restore side. I mean, backups are one thing, but when you have to restore, you want to make sure that you get a full restore that's production ready. And so that's why when we create DynamoDB backups, we retain time to live values, which define retention of specific data in DynamoDB, as well as any tags applied to DynamoDB tables. Automated process with our new RESTful API. So this is a completely new and revamped API. It provides very seamless integration between CPM and other applications. And our customers can now, first of all, automate more of what they're doing with Cloud Protection Manager and also integrate us with many other solutions. This is something that this is our version 1 of our new API set and something that we're going to be developing on quite a bit to the point where you won't need the console anymore if you choose not to use it. Everything can be done through the CLI and API. We're introducing advanced reporting. We took a huge leap in the flexibility of reports. For those of you who are using the product today, you know that there's some canned reports available in the footer. Sebastian will show us briefly, and then you can take time on your own to really run through all the different reports available in our brand new reporting tab. And back to CloudFormation, and this is something that we're really excited about because we really want to ease the pressure of deploying enterprise applications. For anyone that's stood up Cloud Protection Manager already, you know that it doesn't take long to stand up Cloud Protection Manager. When we time it internally, you can get it done in 15 minutes if you're aware of the different steps you have to take, and that's all the way towards from deploying Cloud Protection Manager from Marketplace to setting the necessary permissions, to creating your first policies and your first backups, all the way through performing a restore. That time is measured in minutes. It's not something that's measured in hours, which is exciting for an enterprise software tool. So we're looking to narrow that down to even something that's 5 minutes or less. And the way we're doing that is looking at how CloudFormation can ease in the deployment, how it can set the necessary IAM permissions so that you don't have to go and create any policies, and Sebastian will definitely touch on this some more. We're also introducing additional support for Amazon Aurora. So Amazon Aurora happens to be one of the fastest growing services in AWS, and we have many, many customers who are protecting workloads hosted in Amazon Aurora. So if you're not familiar with it, this is a web-optimized RDS instance that's available in two flavors, a MySQL flavor and a Postgres flavor, and it's delivers the ultimate in performance for an RDS instance, and very, very popular and growing quickly. We've introduced cross-region and cross-account disaster recovery for anybody that's hosting workloads in Amazon Aurora. And enhanced permissions. This is us driving deeper for service providers, additional features for service providers so they can have more granular permissions for independent users, add a lot more value for service providers that are leveraging Cloud Protection Manager and enabling their end users with self-service options. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sebastian to run us through a demo.
Well, this is where I'm going to tag in. This is where it gets really exciting. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and I share my screen. All right, so what you can see here right now is my AWS account. And I thought we're going to try something really exciting for this particular demo. I'm not just going to show you a demo of 2.3. I'm actually going to show you the entire process of upgrading from a previous version of Cloud Protection Manager to our new version. So now what we have is I have my Cloud Protection Manager 2.20a. So that's the last edition that came out before 2.3. I already have this installed in my environment, and I have this instance currently in the stopped state. That's the state it has to be in order to be able to import the data from 2.2 into 2.3. It's also important to mention that there will be no patch file available to go from 2.2 to 2.3. So the process I'm going to show you right now, that's actually the process that you have to go through in order to upgrade to the new version. So the first thing that we want to do is we actually want to make a change to the permissions that are now available to Cloud Protection Manager in order to perform backups and any manipulations within your AWS account. The reason why this is necessary is because of all of the new features that Ezra already mentioned to you. So for example, the DynamoDB, then also the Aurora cross-account, cross-region backups, and a couple other things that are pertaining to the encryption keys as well. So the very first step that we have to do is we have to pick up the new permissions file from our knowledge base. And this is the knowledge base article I'm referring to. We're also going to put the URL of this knowledge base article on the recording of this webinar. You're going to find the permission set right down here. It's a zip file. And then when you extract that zip file, you're going to find an all permissions file. That permissions file looks something like this. All you have to do is just simply copy the entire content of this permissions file. It's just a simple JSON file, and then switch to your IAM management console in your AWS environment. The change that we have to perform is on your policies. So as you can see, I already went to my policies. And then the next part is I have to choose that I want to see only my managed policies. So those are the policies that I created for other applications and appliances in my AWS environment. So that is the permission set that I'm using within Cloud Protection Manager. So if I select this, I see the previous one, and now I'm going to switch to Edit Policy, and then I'm going to switch to JSON because I actually have to get into the editor. And then really all I have to do is just simply copy and paste the new permissions file that I have here, that's for 2.3, into my existing policy. That's really all there is to it. So just simply copy and paste the contents of the new permissions file into your existing policy. All right, so then the next step, we need to record some information. So the first part that we need to know for Cloud Protection Manager that we're trying to upgrade is we need to record which VPC we're using, which subnet we're using, and also make sure that you know which availability zone Cloud Protection Manager is installed in, because later on we're going to choose which information we're going to import into the new installation of Cloud Protection Manager, which will be coming from the availability zone that Cloud Protection Manager is currently installed in. The next part that we need is we need to have access to the data drive that Cloud Protection Manager is currently using. So you have SDA1, that's the root device, that's where Cloud Protection Manager is booting from, and then we also have the data drive as well, that's SDF. I'm going to select this, and over here, that's the volume that we have. I'm going to select this now. Well, it's going to take me to my volume management, and as you can see, currently this volume is still attached to my Cloud Protection Manager 2.2. So it's already pre-selected. I'm going to go to Actions. I'm going to detach that volume. It's just going to take a moment while it's detaching that volume from my existing Cloud Protection Manager installation. All we're waiting for is just simply this to say that it's now available. As we're waiting for this process, let's also dig into a couple other of the new options. As you already heard Ezra mention, we do have a RESTful API available now. Let me just show you this real quick. This is the documentation for our new RESTful API. It's absolutely beautiful, especially if you used our previous API, because every single component within Cloud Protection Manager is now available through our API. Previously, you were able to back up and restore items and make some modifications within Cloud Protection Manager. But now, every single component, creating policies, creating schedules, everything can be done through our API. And as you can see, it's quite a document because it really contains a lot of information. Right, now let's switch back. And our volume has now been detached, so it's available now. That's really all we needed. Now, let's install the new version of Cloud Protection Manager. Just to be on the safe side, I'm going to go back to my Cloud Protection Manager installation. I'm going to go to the AWS Marketplace. Now I'm going to type in N2W, that's our company name. I'm going to search for this. And these are the different editions that are available. All you have to do in this search pattern, just simply search for the edition that you have currently installed. In my case here, it's the Bring Your Own License edition, so that's the one that I'm going to choose. And that's going to take me to the process. So that's the version that I want, 2.30D. And I'm going to click on Continue to Subscribe. That's going to take me to the section where it will inform me that I already own this software. So I'm going to go to the configuration now. That's going to ask me which version exactly do I want. As we mentioned, we do want the 2.3D. That's the most up-to-date, brand new edition. Then we're going to choose the region that we have Cloud Protection Manager currently installed in. So in my case, that's Oregon, because as you can tell over here, that's the region that I have Cloud Protection Manager in. Then I'm going to choose Continue to Launch. It's going to give me a new option here as well. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because just recently the one-click option was changed. So there are a few more clicks that you have to go through in order to perform that configuration. So what you want to choose is Launch through EC2. Click on Launch. And it's going to take me to the section that you're probably already used to. So what I'm going to choose now is, in my case, the T2 Micro. But the different sizes might change based on the instances that you're backing up using Cloud Protection Manager. But in my case, T2 Micro is just fine. So I'm going to go to Configure. So remember, we do have to use the exact same configuration that we saw in our installation. So that's the VPC. In my case, I only have one VPC, and we also have to choose the subnet. If you did forget about it, you can always click back and find out what the configuration was. So in my case, that's the one. I'll switch back. That's the section that I used. And as you can also see, that subnet is in the region that I'm choosing, West 2B, West 2B. Always make sure, because that's probably one of the most important steps. Then I also choose the IAM role that I already chose with my previous installation, which was into W CPM. I'm going to go to storage. I don't have to make any changes here because I installed the original Cloud Protection Manager with the same settings. You probably want to choose the same settings that you chose. So if you did make some changes here, you want to make sure that those are the ones. Now, in my case, I want to make it really easy on myself, so I'm going to give this a name already. And we're going to call this CPM 2.3.0D. configuration for my security group. So you could allow Cloud Protection Manager to create a new security group, but that's really not necessary because I already have one that's pre-selected for me. So I'm going to choose that one. Review and launch, and ultimately launch. Now I also have to choose the existing key pair. I'm just going to go with the same key pair that I used previously. I'm going to launch instance. So that's really all there is to it. Now at this point, Cloud Protection Manager is going to start up in my environment, and then we're going to go through the configuration process of actually importing the information. So the new instance is now up and running. I'm going to click on that. That's going to take me to my EC2 console. As you can see right now, it's still starting up. I can already go ahead and grab this IP address. I'm going to copy this into my clipboard because in a moment we'll be able to access Cloud Protection Manager using that IP. Now, a couple other things that Ezra already mentioned is about our ability now to be able to back up Aurora databases, not just across your existing region, but also cross-region and also cross-account. You probably want to take a look if you're not currently utilizing Aurora. The reason why Aurora is becoming so popular is because it's just absolutely blazingly fast. Just a couple of days ago, I saw a benchmark testing, a comparison between DynamoDB, which of course is very interesting. It's easy to deploy, but then also as far as functionality is concerned and speed with Aurora databases. The benchmark that I saw was 1 million access transactions performed in DynamoDB within the same VPC would take about 2 hours. And the same amount of transactions, 1 million transactions, within an Aurora database would only take about 2.5 minutes. So as you can tell, it's blazingly fast, and that's why it's really becoming extremely popular. All right, so now Cloud Protection Manager should be done booting up. So what we're going to do is we'll open up a tab. We're going to hit this with HTTPS, always important. I'm going to select this. Now, the reason why it says here this site is not secure is because we're using HTTPS, and by default, the first time we're connecting to it, we're actually using a self-signed cert by Cloud Protection Manager. So I'm going to go to details. I'm going to go to my web page. Now, we do need to prove that this is actually our instance. So the way we're going to do this is we do have the ability to see the instance ID. So we're going to go back to our console. I'm going to copy that instance ID. I'm going to select Cloud Protection Manager, paste that information in here, click Next. Now, this is where you want to read the license terms and agreements. Really important because we're probably going to ask for your firstborn and a couple other things as well. So click on Next. This is also important because the license that you have, in my case, because I selected the Bring Your Own License edition, my account is already licensed. So that's another section that I have to pay attention to. Then the next part here, this is going to be the same admin user account that you originally used on your previous installation of Cloud Protection Manager. So in my case, I used admin, and we're going to use or reuse this information to open up the information that we're going to try to import in a moment. I'm going to click on Next. Now, also over here, we have to choose the time zone. The reason why that is important is because all of our schedules are actually running in that time zone. Choose new or existing. Well, this is what we were interested in because we want to use an existing data volume. I'm going to click on Next. Now, this is where I get to choose my data volumes. Well, this is the data volume that we chose. Remember, Cloud Protection Manager data. Here, I also have the option to import my own SSL certificate. Remember, that's what we just saw when we first logged in, because it's going to say, well, I can't trust this certificate because there is no root certificate because it's a self-signed certificate. So this is where you would choose your own certificate if you do have one. Then we're going to click on Next again. Now you can also register this account as well. In my case, I already have my account registered, so I can tick box this. Configure the system. I'm only going to take a moment now to actually import all of this information. There we go. So Cloud Protection Manager was configured successfully. Now I'm going to click on my Here button. There we go. Now, as you can see, we're already using 2.3D. Perfect. And we're going to log into the application. And there we go. As you can see with this, my entire configuration was imported. So now I upgraded from 2.2 to 2.3D. And that entire process took us probably about 5 minutes, something along those lines. Most of the time that we actually spent was during the configuration. And as I already mentioned, that the CloudFormation template is just about to get released, which is going to make this even faster. Essentially, it's going to be a one-click affair. All of the configuration, all of the permissions that we talked about, all of that is going to be automatically selected. All right, so now this is what we had to do to get to 2.3. Now let's dig a little bit more into the different features. What I'm going to do for that is I'm going to switch to my other lab because it's going to make it easier, because some of the things I wanted to show you are actually installed in this lab. It's very similar to when you watch a cooking show and they're going to show you, this is the dough of the cake and here's the finished cake. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to log in. And you already heard that we now also support SAML authentication, Active Directory Federation services, and also Okta. That is our identity provider login. So when you configure that, you will be able to log in using an identity provider right here at the first login screen within Cloud Protection Manager. Now let me log into my system. And in this system, I have a few more configurations. That's also one of the reasons why I wanted to show you this. So DynamoDB recovery is a capability now that we have in Cloud Protection Manager. As you can see, that's my backup monitor. That's my single pane of glass. So I can see all of the backups that Cloud Protection Manager has performed across all regions, across all my different AWS accounts. Currently, we're logged in as the root admin user, which is really interesting because we get to see all of the different configurations. Of course, I can start filtering this as before. And one of the things that we're interested in is DynamoDB. I already have a policy for that. So if I select this, you can see the different backups that I've performed over the different days. And of course, I can also limit this or further be more granular about the different backups that I'm performing. I don't have to create daily backups. I could perform backups every 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, completely dependent on what processes you have in place. That's my recover functionality, and it works just like you're already used to with your EC2 configurations. Another one that's really interesting is our Aurora capability. Now over here, I also have a policy for my Aurora recovery. Remember, we did mention that now we also support cross-account backups for Aurora. So let's actually perform one, because today we're going to be adventurous. Everything we're going to do live. So here's my Aurora backup. I'm going to click on recover. And as before, you see these three menus because that's how I have it configured. I have cross-region and also cross-account backup. So that's my original account. That's what I want to restore from. I want to restore to my disaster recovery account. And I also want to choose my original region. So that's going to trigger a cross-account backup recovery into my backup account, my disaster recovery account. So I'm going to choose Recover Aurora Clusters. That's the cluster that I want to recover. And also make sure that you choose a VPC, because if you leave this blank, it's not going to work. Now, next part is we're going to recover the Aurora cluster. It's going to say, are you sure you want to do this? Sure, let's do it. Let's see what happens. Well, it's only going to take a moment. We're going to get another message after that, which will inform us that now Cloud Protection Manager is performing the recovery of that Aurora database into the other account. There we go. Now, of course, you don't have to take my word for it that this is a recovery that's actually happening right now, because remember, I just showed you the recovery or the installation of Cloud Protection Manager in my secondary account. Let's take a closer look. So that's the secondary account. And I also have my Cloud Protection Manager right here, and see, this is my recovery. So it's happening right now within my secondary account. So that's our new and improved Cloud Protection Manager recovery of Aurora databases, not just only across regions, but also across accounts. Couple other things that are interesting as well is enhanced permissions for independent users. So especially if you're in the MSP sector, then you probably noticed that our permissions settings within the user section were interesting, but a little bit limited because I do have the ability to create independent users and managed users. Independent users are, just like the name suggests, are completely independent. They can create their own policies. They can create their own schedules. I can, of course, be granular about the permissions that they have. Are they allowed to perform recoveries, file level recoveries, that sort of thing. The only limiting factor with this is, well, how do I create, in quotes, sub-users to my independent users? Because these independent users could theoretically be MSPs themselves. The only way I could previously create this was with delegates. It was kind of complicated because then I had to create different kinds of policies, different kinds of schedules for these users. And there was really no clean way of segregating the different users off that particular sub-account. That's completely changed now because you have an additional button right here, Assign Managed Users. So that means all of my sub-users, my customers that I'm providing this service to, now count as managed users, and I can just simply assign them to an independent user, which then means that this independent user can log in and then manage the policies and the schedules and the different configurations of those managed users. So that's a really important feature as well. As we're talking about user accounts, let's also take a quick look at our AWS accounts that we can configure within Cloud Protection Manager. So when we switch to accounts, looks very familiar, right? But there are a lot of new functionalities that you're going to find. One that I absolutely love is right here. Check AWS permissions. We did talk about permissions earlier because there are some additional permissions necessary for Cloud Protection Manager to perform all of its duties. Because we have DynamoDB, we have Aurora. Now, if I click this, it's actually going to show us all of the permissions that this account has. And if permissions are missing for certain subsections, it will let us know. So I can just simply browse for this, and I can also see how these permissions that are necessary for RDS backup, EC2 recovery, DR recovery, what the permissions are, and if they are covered, and it will also show us how these permissions are being covered. So if you're missing something, it's very easy to see. Great for troubleshooting. You do have the ability to download these permissions. So if you want to retain them, sometimes there are some compliance requirements where you actually have to be able to retain permissions that are assigned to these users. But we did talk about reports. So let's dig into that a little bit more. So as before, we do have the reports available on the home screen, all the way at the bottom. And down here, we have the different subsections for the reports. Again, looks familiar, but as you can already tell, there are some more reports here. So not only my backup, my snapshot, my usage report, two really important reports have been added. First one, once you start using Cloud Protection Manager, probably very quickly, one question is going to come up. Which resources are not protected? So that's the report that we have right here, Unprotected Resources Report. That's going to tell me everything that we're not backing up based on what I have access to. Of course, we also have the capability of reversing that same question. The question would be, well, what are we backing up? So over here, I have my Protected Resources Report. If I click on this real quick, we'll be able to extract this information, and there it is. Let's bring this up. And here you can see the different schedules, the different policies, the regions, the instances, and also the instance ID and which user account, which Cloud Protection Manager AWS account is being used to perform these backups. So this is really great, especially once again, if I do have compliance needs where I have to prove that we're performing backups. And also, I just want to make sure that everything is truly being backed up. That is one step. Now, the next step, and this is a real treat, some in our pipeline, in our roadmap, is a complete overhaul of our graphical user interface. And that's where the treat comes in because we also have the ability to further customize these reports. And it's a brand new tab. It's right here, Reports. You see where it says Preview? That's because This preview will even show you what our new graphical user interface is going to look like. As you can tell, we are now a Veeam company, so it means that our color scheme is going to switch a little bit into the green. So all of these buttons will soon be available, but right now you do have the reports button available. Remember when you used to extract reports from Cloud Protection Manager, it's an all or nothing. You're retrieving a backup report. You're retrieving a snapshot report. Well, it's not a huge deal because then I can use Excel and then filter the information that I want. But wouldn't it be nice to be also able to filter that information already within the product? And that's exactly what we're providing now. So very easily I can choose which AWS account I want to retrieve information from. And then right here within the product, I can then choose my time frame, my interval that I'm actually interested in. So I don't have to use another third-party product in order to start filtering the information that's important to me. All I have to do is just simply click on the download button here and then retrieve that information. Now, all of this information is really just pertaining mostly to upgrading from 2.2 to 2.3. Now, before we end all of this, for users, for participants in this webinar who have never seen Cloud Protection Manager, let's do a really quick overview of the capabilities of Cloud Protection Manager as it is, as it stands. So we did talk about the backup monitor. That's your single pane of glass. No longer do I have to actually go through my AWS console, and switch from one region to another region. Within my policies, I have very granular control over what do I actually want to back up. Over here are my backup targets. I can create a policy and then choose within these backup targets what I want to back up. Instances plus anything that's attached to them, so I don't have to figure out which volumes do I actually need and how do I need to reconnect them, to which devices do they need to be connected to. I also have the option to back up only volumes, usually data at rest, RDS databases, Aurora clusters, really interesting feature, Redshift clusters, and of course, last but not least, also the DynamoDB tables. Once I define what I want to back up, disaster recovery is going to be the next section. So that's what our DR button here is for. In this case, if I select this, I can turn it on. I can choose how often do I want disaster recovery backup to be performed. I can choose which region I want this disaster recovery to be performed. I can even choose multiple regions as well, if that's what I want to do. Cross-account disaster recovery. Really important, because what happens if, for whatever reason, you would lose control of your primary AWS account? That would be really bad, right? Do you want to sleep well tonight? Then don't do what I'm going to tell you next. Go to Google and type in CodeSpaces. That's a nightmare in itself. It's a company which just a few years ago went out of business overnight because they seemingly did all the right things. They performed backups of all of their environment. They even performed cross-region backups, but then they lost control due to hacking of their primary account. And they couldn't regain control of their account, of the data that's stored in there. And as I said, they went out of business overnight. Could have been completely alleviated if they would just simply done this right here. Cross-account disaster recovery. So that's an option within Cloud Protection Manager as well. Now, after we talked about all of this, how do we back up? Let's actually perform a recovery as well. So in our case, we're going to do a recovery of a Linux instance. So over here, that's my Linux farm policy. I'm going to click on recover. I have different instances within this policy. Here's my Apache, here's my SQL. I'm going to choose to only recover this one single instance. So I'm going to do an instance recovery. Now over here, I get a few more options. Now I have the option to restore that information into different availability zone, different VPC, and we already talked about cross-account, cross-region. Now here I have the choice between different VPCs, subnets. I can assign a different security group if I wanted to. I can even change the instance type. Maybe we always talked about that. We needed to change the instance type. We just never got around to it. Well, I can actually make that change as we are performing the recovery. Preserve tags, as I mentioned this earlier. That's a really interesting feature because if you're using custom tags to run reports on your resources, well, we're going to preserve these tags and apply them to the backups, to the snapshots that Cloud Protection Manager will produce. Then you can run reports on the backups. So you will be able to see where these backups are coming from. Any type of tags that you're using on the original data, you'll be able to run reports on these backups. Once we perform a recovery, we're also going to reapply those tags to the recovered data. So really interesting feature. I don't use static IP, so let me get rid of this. And down here, that's recover instance. I'm going to click on that button. It says, are you sure you want to do this? You want to recover this instance? Once again, we're going to be excited today. We're going to be really adventurous. Let's do it live. Recovery succeeded, and one instance was launched. Now let's go back to our view of our AWS account. I'm going to refresh the screen, and there we go. That's really all there is to it. So now my instance is being recovered. And right now it's still in pending, and it's probably going to stay like that for another 20, 25 seconds. Yeah, you heard right. That's really how fast Cloud Protection Manager has the ability to recover an entire instance from a complete outage to being completely available. The moment that button turns green, because of a feature that Amazon called the lazy loading feature, that instance will be fully functional. So in case of my SQL database, I can immediately start hitting it with SQL transactions. I'm not going to time out, and I'm not going to get any errors. And now it turned green, and I still have a job, and I have my entire system recovered. So this is really where Cloud Protection Manager shines, the RPO and the RTO. As I mentioned, you can easily create schedules that perform backups of your environment of a running system. Ezra already mentioned this, every few minutes if you'd like. And then in order to achieve a very low RTO, that's where Cloud Protection Manager shines. My entire environment can be up and running again in a few minutes. Remember, we did talk about using the API for that process as well. All right, so that was a general overview of 2.3 and also how you get your existing installation of Cloud Protection Manager onto 2.3. So Ezra, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Sebastian, that was awesome, as usual. So thank you so much. And we did prepare some seed questions, and we definitely don't need them. So there are quite a few questions in the Q&A, and I think we should take this opportunity to run through some of them. Just due to time, if we don't get to them all, just know that they will all be addressed. We've recorded them, and we will update anybody that asked a question. The first one here is for backup default, and this is a very common question we get. Would that work for EBS volumes that use a default encryption key?
Oh, yes, that's actually, I saw this one pop up. So yes, absolutely. Pretty much any resource that Cloud Protection Manager has the capability of performing backups for. So this is not just volumes. It's not just instances. It's even your RDS instances. It's your RDS instances, your volumes, all of that. Cloud Protection Manager can handle the KMS encryption keys on the back end, completely transparent. Now, really interesting, this also works not just in the same AWS account, it also works cross-account as well. So yes, the answer is absolutely, we can use the default key, but we also have the option not to use the default key. So both is possible.
Thanks. And what is the granular level of the multi-tenancy? So I know we've expanded on that quite a bit. Can you tell us a little bit about how deep this goes at this point?
Well, especially with the new feature, it goes even further. So this is truly down the rabbit hole. It used to be that I would be an MSP and I can then provide that service to my customers. Well, now we essentially added another tier to this. So I could be an MSP. I have MSP customers, and they can have their own customers. So that's exactly what I just showed you, where you can assign managed users to independent users. So we truly added a whole new level for granularity.
There were two questions about links to documentation, one for the IDP documentation and another for the minimal permissions. And just want to let the audience know that both of those will be shared. The IDP documentation is now available in the user guide on the N2WS site. It's the final chapter of the user guide, and that's up there. And the minimal permissions is found in our KB section, and we'll definitely share links to both of them. Another question here, will the CPM CLI continue working after the upgrade?
Yep, Absolutely. It still works just fine. But quite frankly, once you update and you're going to take a look at the RESTful API, you will find you won't even want to use that anymore. But absolutely, it still works just as before. One more question that I answered earlier as we were going through this, as Ezra was doing his presentation, which I thought was kind of important. One of our attendees asked, well, what if I have 2.1, Cloud Protection Manager 2.1? Can I then go to 2.3? The answer is no. You do have to go from 2.1 to 2.2 and then do an upgrade to 2.3. Essentially, the process is exactly the same that I just showed you, but there's that additional step.
And that brings an interesting point. Sebastian, I know we have a strong team underneath you. How do we support customers who need help moving between our editions? Can you expand on that a bit?
Oh, absolutely. We have an amazing support team. There's just nothing that what else can be said about this. So if you do have trouble with this, you can easily contact our support organization. But also, if you do have a sales representative who you're regularly talking to within a Cloud Protection Manager, within N2WS, just simply contact them. If you do run into an issue, we can certainly help you with this. But as you saw, it's not very difficult, but we can certainly hold your hand. We can take you through this. We'll get one of my colleagues to help you through this, either a support engineer or one of our system engineers.
Shane has a really interesting question. As a service provider, my IAM role in the account is used by multiple CPM instances. If I update one instance and the IAM role, will that change affect instances running on previous versions of 2.2?
That is an interesting question. No, it wouldn't really have any impact because when you're doing the import from 2.2 into 2.3, all of your configurations are going to be right there. So, for example, when I did the import from 2.2 into 2.3, if I would have shown you the account section, yeah, you would just see the IAM user, and it would just perfectly work without any trouble. It doesn't really matter what type of authentication you use.
And specifically, Sebastian, correct me if I'm wrong, the changes to IAM permissions are to enable things like cross-region DR for Amazon Aurora. That was not necessarily configured in previous minimal permissions, and Cloud Protection Manager would need expanded permissions for that functionality. Can you confirm that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that is exactly correct. Nothing really changed as far as the existing permissions are concerned. So if you wouldn't use, for whatever reason, any of the new features, yeah, you wouldn't need to make changes. But I'm sure once you get to know DynamoDB, Aurora, cross-account, cross-region, disaster recovery, KMS, key management, you want to make use of the new features. And just so that this is really completely smooth, that transition, that's why we're making a change to the permissions. It's really only to add additional functionality to the product.
Another great question. Is it possible to recover more than one instance at a time with the DR options?
Perfect. Absolutely. So, because when you have a disaster recovery situation, my entire production environment is probably not just consistent of one single instance. So you're absolutely right. You could use the RESTful API to perform a complete recovery of your entire environment. Doesn't matter how many instances, 50, 100, 1,000, you could literally trigger that restore through the RESTful API. That's why I actually showed you the documentation to this. It's a really, really exciting feature because not only do we have the ability now to configure all of these backups through the API, but we also have the option to restore an entire environment just through the API.
Another question about what happens if the CPM instance fails or the region where CPM is running fails. And you kind of touched on this when you showed us how easy it is to stand up Cloud Protection Manager and associate it to an existing data volume. Can you expand on that a bit more?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That is a good question. So when you're performing backups off your resources, volumes, instances, well, there's nothing to hold you back from using Cloud Protection Manager to perform a backup of CPM itself. And then when I'm performing a disaster recovery backup of CPM into another region or into another account, well, the data sits there. I could literally then spin up Cloud Protection Manager in case of a disaster in another region or even in another account, and then just simply import the data as we've just seen in that other region or in that other account. So you could perform a disaster recovery of Cloud Protection Manager itself. Once you perform that recovery, well, that's where Cloud Protection Manager really starts to shine, because that was one single recovery, but I still have 100, 200, 500 different instances. Well, then at that point, I would just use the RESTful API to then trigger the recovery of my entire environment. But yes, the process is exactly the same that you've just seen. You just simply import the data in another region or in another account into a blank installation of Cloud Protection Manager.
Can you touch on the best method for orchestrating multiple restores at once? Is it still using the CLI?
You could, absolutely. So that is one option. But going forward, I would suggest taking a look at our REST API. So like you're already used to using the CLI, you have the ability to trigger a recovery of multiple instances at the same time. But using the API will just give you a lot more features. It's just tremendously more feature rich. It's really like a quantum leap as far as functionality is concerned.
Well, at this point, we're way past the top of the hour, and we're going to call it to a close. Every question that was asked through the Q&A and chat will be addressed. And we just want to thank you all for joining us today for today's session on Cloud Protection Manager 2.3. You've been a great audience, very engaged and interactive, and it's always appreciated. And we hope to see you at a future N2WS event. Anything to sign off with there, Sebastian?
Well, speed. That's really where it's at. Because if your entire environment goes down, you want your environment to come back up really speedy. And that's what Cloud Protection Manager stands for.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.